Good evening to all our viewers all across Guyana and, of course, in the wider world. Welcome once again to this Elections 2020 update. It seems like elections took place a year ago in Guyana, but it seems really a long time. But it has been, and I must tell you, it's been an intolerable amount of time. I think we may now have the world record for election results not being declared properly. It's now, I think, 31 minus 2, 29. It's 30 days. It's 30 days since we had elections in Guyana, and elections are not officially over because no declaration that complies with Section 84(1) of the requisite laws have been made in Guyana. Viewers out there, let us say thanks to Globespan team, Nohar Singh, of course, the owner of the platform, Devin Bisoon, and all the other technical operators that makes this program successful and make it possible. Thanks to them all. Welcome to tonight's hot seat, hot topic with senior counsel and senior, you're a senior in my mind, with senior counsel, and I don't mean in age, Anil Nandlall, discussing elections update, and we will soon be joined by one of our professors, Dr. Richard Heads from London, as we talk COVID-19. It's what's happening over in the UK, in Europe, and especially of interest, what should people who suffer from cardiovascular disease, how should they pay attention, special attention to COVID and stuff like that. That's what we have lined up for tonight. But viewers, let's come back to this animal that is called Elections 2020 in Guyana. And I'll have you remember that 30 days ago we had elections in this country. 30 days ago, within that time, the court in Guyana, Chief Justice Madam Roxanne George, admonished the Elections Commission, GCOM, instructing them to ensure that they do a declaration of the results of the election that is compliant with 84(1) of the requisite law, Representation of the People Act. Now, I've had a lot of discussions with people online. People have said there has been a declaration. Senior counsel is here tonight and he will correct me if I'm wrong, viewers, but a declaration, the definition of a declaration is in 84(1). Unless you comply with 84(1), you have not had a declaration. We will go into that tonight, but since then, there has been so-called declarations. There has been what I believe are frivolous cases now being thrown up and followed up by frivolous application for appeal. We'll get into all of that. More seriously, Guyana has a unique situation where we have a pandemic of huge physical threat to life proportions and economic proportions, and we do not have a legitimate government in office. We have a president that shall remain president until a new president is sworn in. We do have his officers that comprise of legally a caretaker government. So viewers, join me in welcoming Mr. Anil Nandlall here tonight as we discuss what would have happened, what is our current status quo, where we are legally, and where we seem to be heading. Counsel, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much, Yog, and permit me to say good evening to your viewers. I think that you have given a very insightful introduction. Only today, this afternoon, I had to give a comment to Stabrook News, apparently on a story that they are writing. And I had cause to say to the reporter that Guyana, the situation in Guyana is without precedent, in the sense that I don't believe, at least over the past 5 decades, has there been a country that has taken so long after the elections to swear in the new government. And it's not because Guyana is suffering from some natural disaster that is causing this hiatus to take place. or we have some unforeseen, unpreventable phenomenon that is preventing the new government from being sworn in, is because the government, the party that has lost the elections, are simply refusing to give up in accordance with the rules of the game, give up the government in accordance with the rules of the game called democracy. So they are detaining themselves in power, um, and are demanding all sorts of craziness. For example, shared governance, and coming up with all sorts of excuses for not complying with the rules of the game. Um, they have gone to the courts. They have not been successful. The Chief Justice, the full court, in a very, very comprehensive judgment, faultless judgment, if I may say, dismissed, upheld our appeal, sorry, and dismissed the case that they were depending upon to carry them through, and refused to grant them leave on the ground that any proposed or prospective appeal has no likelihood of success, because the question that is for the review of the court is a question of jurisdiction. It's only 3 lines in the Representation of the People Act. Just 3 lines. Not a single word is ambiguous. And when we put out our submissions, the battery of lawyers that they have assembled from across the Caribbean did not answer our submission. They simply they skirted around it. They cited irrelevant case law authorities, but they did not. We are saying that the decisions of GCOM can only be inquired into by a court of law once that court is moved by an elections petition. It's not that the court doesn't have jurisdiction, the High Court. It has jurisdiction, but that jurisdiction can only be invoked by the utilization of a particular procedural mode. And that simple proposition is causing them tremendous difficulty in comprehending. And that is why the full court, comprising of Justice Hardinan and Chief Justice George, was very, very compelling, convincing, and compendious in their written judgment. It, as I said, it's faultless. And I want to take this opportunity to commend the judiciary, and in particular the full court, for delivering that judgment with such alacrity. And the court worked the entire weekend. We all worked, even the lawyers on that side. We all worked the entire weekend, the registry staff, because we were emailing each other, and everything was being done by e-filing, and we were communicating with each other by the internet and by emails, and we were able to accomplish a masterful feat in the end by having that case, an appeal determined. That appeal was filed Friday afternoon at about 4 p.m. and we got it heard and determined by Tuesday morning. I think that is a remarkable feat to be accomplished under any legal system, any part of the world. And I believe that the judiciary is really delivering. And I hope, and it is the country's expectation, that the Court of Appeal will follow suit. We are going there tomorrow, as you know by now, to hear an application for leave to appeal, because the full court denied them leave. And anytime, because you are moving from one appellate court to another, if we were moving from the High Court to the appellate court, you have an appeal as of right. But because you have already exhausted one tier of the appellate process, and you're now moving to another tier of the appellate process, the law restricts your access. Remember, you don't, while you have access to justice, you don't have unhindered and unregulated access to justice, because the floodgates, the proverbial floodgates, can be opened if there are not strictures qualifying your case to go along the way. So if it is that you don't have a case, then you can't exercise that right of appeal. after you pass a certain stage in the judicial rung, the ladder, so to speak. So the full court denied them leave to appeal to the Court of Appeal, but they have another opportunity to go to the Court of Appeal itself to ask the Court of Appeal for leave to appeal. And they have also asked that the application for leave, that the appeal itself be heard at the application for leave stage. A position which we will not have any great difficulty with, because the issue is a narrow one. The submissions are all before the court. The research has been done. And I can't imagine any judge can read the language of the law in its current formulation differently from the way that we have read it. As I said, if you look at it and you scrutinize it word for word, they are simple English words which carry their literal connotations and grammatical ordinary meanings. They are incapable of an ambivalent, ambiguous, or equivocal meaning. And so I cannot imagine that any trained, rational, legal mind can put a different interpretation to the one that we have put to the full court, which the full court comprising of 2 judges have accepted. But at the end of the day, the games continue to be played, because today, we all know that the chairpersons gave a commitment that the recount will begin as soon as the injunctions are lifted. The president, in his plea, and I say plea in uplifted commas, for not consummating his commitment expressed in that CARICOM accord and the subsequent aid memoir, was because he was helpless, because he was injuncted by Yolita Moore. Well, that state of helplessness was removed, both from the president and GCOM. And we have a whole day passing today, and not a single movement forward. Instead of the president prosecuting his promise and his intention as expressed in that CARICOM accord by instructing his candidate Yolita Moore not to proceed with an appeal, we see an appeal being filed. And rather than instruct his commissioners at GCOM to go to GCOM, I have made a commitment to CARICOM and carry out this recount, we hear via a news press release that the government commissioners want to study the judgment. Nonsense, as I've said in a Facebook post. There is nothing for them to study. You and I heard it. It was streamed live. All the newspapers broadcast it. All the television broadcast it. What is there for them to study? All they need to know is that there is no longer an injunction. And correct. That ought to have been made clear to them. They had legal representatives in the court. The chief elections officer was represented by senior counsel Boston. And they have many, many people to whom they can turn for legal advice. So I do not buy that argument that they need to study anything. It's all part of the shenanigans to dilate and delay. And I don't know to what end, Yog. I want to say, use your platform here to say that no matter what they do, they will not continue in government illegally. None. That will not happen. And we don't care how long they stay in the judicial system. We are going to win in the end, because democracy, justice, and the rule of law are always on the same side. And we are on that side. And the other side can never win. Injustice can never prevail over justice.
Correct. So, Counsel, interesting, because I tell you what, I share what you have said there, and I've said so on another show today. Look, the truth is that the court, the full court, they took 24 hours. God bless them. They realized the seriousness of this thing, and it's not the first time Madam Roxanne George has done it. And they, within 24 hours, they gave a decision which ended up lifting the injunctions that would have constrained GCOM. 24 hours after that, GCOM still has nothing, absolutely nothing, zilch, to say to the electorates whose ballots is under the trust of Chairman Claudette Singh. So it's amazing, and I'm not going to ask you to comment unless you so want to weigh in, Council. But to our viewers out there, I am tempted to repeat a phrase that I heard Madam Roxanne George said in her handing down that decision a couple days on Wednesday, when she said on Monday, sorry, when she said that uh, legislative mischief was the phrase she used. She said, in the framers of these laws would never have contemplated legislative mischief. And to Council's point here, it's amazing that we are playing a waiting game on the casting of ballots that you and I did on 2nd of March, and where are we with our ballots and it being counted and declared for that section. To our viewers out there, Council, I'm going to, just 1 second, let me just say this. To our viewers out there, many of you would have inboxed me. Here is my position. I am not on any political slate. I don't care who forms the executive branch of running this country. I don't care which group of politicians run this country. But in doing so, as I did in 2015 and 2014 and 2013, I oppose what I deem to be wrong then, give everybody a chance to explain, and I will continue to do so. My bottom line is that there must not, declaration of the results must be in compliance with the laws. No two ways about it, no compromise. When that declaration is done and a swearing-in ceremony takes place, whether it's Mr. Granger or whoever else, that person will be deemed the president, and I will promise to uphold a very vigilant, I promise to uphold that very vigilant scrutiny of the activities of the next government and to ensure we can have an inclusive government to solve all of our problems in this country. Council, back to what you said. GCOM has so far shown great reluctance to allow two things, either the law to be followed or to even admonish its employees for wrongdoing. So the question is, what is you and your party's position with Mr. Mingo being a part of a recount process going forward? And number two is, if GCOM now says they're waiting for tomorrow morning for this what I deem to be a frivolous case, for this case to be heard, then tomorrow morning it means the court will say, give us 24 hours for them to give a decision. Or maybe, I'm hoping it's going to be 24 and not more. So this week is done. What is your party now prepared to do to force GCOM to act if it doesn't act?
Now, in your preambulatory remarks, you made reference to the declaration of the results, and you said that it must be legal. Now, because you alluded to persons contending that a declaration has been made. Now, this declaration is not a perfunctory, sterile act. It's a term of art. It's a legal act. A declaration that is required under the law is a declaration of the totality of the votes cast in the ballots, so that the RO cannot conjure up his own figures and declare it, and that becomes the results. That is why the law first of all prescribe a process that he must comply with before he arrives at that declaration. And that process requires a tabulation of the votes from the SOPs, because the SOPs is the physical summary of the votes counted at the place of poll in accordance with law. And that is why the emphasis on the law is that it is the SOPs must be used as the basis of the tabulation, not the RO producing a spreadsheet from God knows where and claim that those are the figures that he get from the SOPs. No, no, no. That's a break in the nexus. There
Right.
must be every link of the chain must be
But
there.
also, but counsel, if I may interrupt. So another point that I think has been raised, and it's something I've been pushing myself. Look, the RO, Mr. Mingo, he had set a precedent for himself in the first 380 SOPs. In other words, to the viewers out there, this man read, he held up 380 SOPs. Then
426.
sorry, 426 SOPs, thank you. And he set a precedence for himself and then decided he was going to shelve those SOPs and read from a handwritten, pre-prepared piece of paper. And that's what you're talking. So, counsel, is that
Yes.
precedence he set a viable argument now that can be used?
But, well, you call it a precedent. I say that that is how the law meant to be. That is what the law contemplated.
Right.
And during that 426 process, when he was doing that, during that process, he even used the assistance of a projector. And he was projecting the statements of Paul against the wall. It was at that point in time that I left. And then I left and I made an inquiry of him. I said, Mr. Mingo, my counting agents are here. Am I to assume that we are working whole night because I have to make arrangements to get another shift of people? He says, yes, we are working whole night until the exercise will be concluded. And I left that building at about 9 o'clock. By the time I reached home, and I live in Georgetown, by the time I reached to my home, I received a call that Mingo called off the exercise. By that time, I had already had another group of people going to change shift at 12 midnight, and then another set coming on at sometime about 4 in the morning. I had made all those plans. And then I received a call that he suddenly got tired and that he will resume the next morning. Well, I didn't take much of that. I didn't see much into that. Next morning, he said he will resume at 9. At about 11, there was no resumption. And then somebody escorted him out with an oxygen mask on his face, and the theater started to play. And that's when the rigging machine came into force. So the point I want to make, though, is that that the declaration is not a sterile act. You don't declare anything. You declare the results of the elections based upon the ballots cast as is summarized in each statement of poll relative to a ballot box. So it's a compilation of that you declare. And then when you declare that, lo and feel, there's another check. Remember, one set of statements of poll goes to the RO, and one set goes to Lowenfield, the chief elections officer. So when he compiles, when the 10 returning officers in the 10 regions would have done their respective declarations and submit a report, 10 individual reports, to Mr. Chief Elections Officer, Mr. Chief Elections Officer also at that point in time is not obliged automatically to accept their reports. He is supposed to have a team of staff, using his statements of poll to check to see that the declarations made by the RO are submitted to him in their reports correspond and is consistent with his SOP. You understand?
Yes.
So that's another check. And that is why, Yog, Lowenfield and the returning officer ought never to have been in the same building. Neither the GCOM secretariat. And that is why the other regions are done separately. It was always intended because they counteract each other. They supervise, they scrutinize each other. And they are not supposed to be the same physical edifice. They're not supposed to interface and interact with each other as they are carrying out their respective exercises under the legislation. But the entire thing was perverted for the very reason that we are now seeing.
Right.
And then when Lowenfield receives that report, Lowenfield then prepares a total report which he gives to the commission, and he must submit his backup documents. And the commission must then study that, because that's another layer of scrutiny. The commission doesn't act with automaticity and takes what Lowenfield says and says, this is it. They are supposed to satisfy themselves that the chief elections officer has actually tabulated the results, cast and the ballots. And they have their own mechanism by which they do that. That brings me to the question you asked me about Mingo.
Right.
Now, Mingo has perverted himself throughout the process, even though he had the benefit and guidance of a court order. He went and he did even worse. So Mingo has disqualified himself. Mingo has demonstrated to the world that he's an errant, delinquent, perverted, corrupt public officer who should never be close to an electoral process ever again. And we intend to make that very clear in the recounting exercise. We have also alluded, and perhaps we will have to do it in writing formally, to the chairperson, that GCOM is already the secretariat. It's already a contaminated, corrupt organization. I don't need to produce evidence for that. I have seen that. I worked at every stage of this process. I had to stop them several times from going into the ballot boxes, going into containers parked in the compound. I had to explain the law to them on many occasions. So it's a nefarious bunch of people at GCOM. That is why it is imperative that that recount be done in the presence of international observers, including the CARICOM team, the Carter team, and as many observers as possible, because you cannot trust the people at GCOM. If you trust the people at GCOM, then you are a retarded person. Something is wrong with your mental capacity, because they have shown you multiplicity of occasions that they are incapable of enjoying trust and public confidence. And GCOM has the power to delegate any of its functions to any person or agency that is authorized to do so. The Constitution has that power, that gives GCOM that power. So an international forum, for example, Deloitte and Touche or one of these international organizations, can also be contracted to do this exercise. And what is it, Yog? This is counting pieces of paper. It's nothing scientific, arithmetic, absolutely non-technical. It's just counting pieces of paper in a box. Our nursery school children can do that.
Well, that's a question. So here is the other thing. Let's come to some current matters, because my prediction is that we are going to look at GCOM start shaking their limbs next week, at which time this country will have to go into some kind of a partial, if not full shutdown, at least a curfew. And there will be a restriction on persons who are to be gathered anywhere. So there will be a question that I think GCOM will ask, do you want to risk the life of people to count votes, or you want to secure their lives? So the COVID thing is that, and the question I have for you, Council, that's one. And two, as you know, Mahadeo have come out publicly criticizing the PPP for announcing an alternate COVID force. And you know, I've not make my disagreement with you guys. I've not hidden it at all. It's out there. What's your position with regards to the PPP having no government status, having no national finance or mechanisms for finance? How can you form a task force for COVID? And aren't you really dividing the people? Who are they going to listen to?
Firstly, let me say that I believe that the highest priority should be accorded to this medical disaster that is facing us. I do not intend to trivialize this thing or to politicize it. It's a serious health problem that we have, and unfortunately, we are in this this fractured state at this point in time, and that's the first thing. Secondly, you asked me about GCOM. Personally speaking, I have no residual trust in GCOM. And if GCOM tells me that they do not want to count the ballots because of COVID, I will not believe them. I will believe that they are using COVID as a platform and an excuse not to count the ballot. Right? I wouldn't accept that from GCOM. Some medically certified person will have to tell me, and this is Anil Nandlall speaking, that it is inimical to public health for us to undertake that exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Thirdly, the PPP has won the election. There's no doubt about that. A majority of Guyanese have not only voted for the PPP, but even a greater number, much greater number now, are standing on the side of righteousness, democracy, the rule of law, and constitutionality. And that happens to be the side of the PPP. And then you have this fringe group that's holding on to power, spending public funds without any legal oversight, any legal authority whatsoever. They are doling out public funds. Politicians are making medical decisions and public health decisions. I'm an educated man, Yog. I can't take medical advice and medical instructions and directions from Walter Lawrence. What is Sham, the chief medical officer, doing? It's not that I know, I think I know. I know more than Walter Lawrence. I know that much. So you have politicians who are making technical decisions, highly technical decisions, that they are not qualified to make. And they're raping the treasury in the process, and there is no transparency in what they're doing, and they're holding on to power illegally. The PPP has a problem because 80% of the people do not accept these people. They don't want to hear from them. What would the PPP, a responsible, mass-based political organization, political party that has also won the elections coincidentally, do in such circumstance? We can't remain impotent and handicapped. We have to do something. Yes, it may not be the ideal thing to do, but in any event, nobody bothering with the government. Look, the people in Good Hope and the people on the East Coast that they're saying infected are calling me whole day. They don't trust anything that the government says to them. If the government wants to move them, to take them to Diamond Hospital, there is a mistrust. They don't accept the government legitimacy. They think that there's a political agenda behind them. I am on the ground every day. And these are political realities that you face, and you have to make decisions, unorthodox decisions, unconventional decisions in an uncharted area. No country, as I've said at the beginning of this program, has ever been in the place where we are at. So I get the sense that you feel that we are acting in an unconventional manner. Well, that's true. We are in an unconventional situation here. And we have assembled our own force and our own mechanism, not because we want to do so, but we can't simply sit idly by and allow the situation to deteriorate, because you don't have legitimacy in the government. The population, if I go to my constituency on the East Coast and I talk to them, or Miss Lawrence goes there, the minister, they will not come out to see her. They will not listen to her. Even if they give them medication, they will not take it from them, because they will believe a sinister motive is at foot. That is unfortunate, but that is where the government has taken the country. And no one must refrain from putting the responsibility at the feet of this government. And the buck stop at the president. He's the one who is responsible. He campaigned as a decent man, a Christian man, a family man, a man who has children and grandchildren, a man who has integrity and honesty. That is what he told the population and he told the world. And look at where he has his people and his country.
Right. So, Council, the fear. I mean, let's come to I know you have to go. So, but before you go, let me, on behalf of all our viewers, commiserate with you and through you to the family of Riaz Holadar because of the unfortunate, untimely, passing. We certainly stand with you in thoughts and prayers at this time. I know he was more than, we normally call him a driver, but he has been like your right hand. And so, that's like severing your right hand from you. But, Council, I've been on Facebook, I've been on social media, I've been on Kaicho Radio and a number of other platforms over the past week. And we are being joined here by our guest from London. He is a senior lecturer at the School of Cardiovascular Medicine and Sciences, Dr. Richard Heads. We'll welcome you just now to the show, sir. But before you go, Council, here is the issue, and to the viewers out there, I am very, very, very passionate about this. Look, across the world, oil prices have crumbled, have come right down. In Guyana, the price at the pumps remain the same. The government is calling on the minibuses to travel with half of the amount of passengers, but the cost of taking the passengers remain the same because the fuel at the pumps are the same. So there has been absolutely zero economic assessment to help people. We are telling people we are going to implement a curfew. People are calling for a lockdown to save their own lives for COVID. Yet, people have been living in Georgetown. I know this. Thousands of people live on a day-to-day basis. Their paycheck, their cash pay is at the end of the day. Tomorrow, if they don't get a job, they don't get paid. Now, with the COVID virus here, people are not going to work. They have no food to eat. People are starving. We have a serious situation in this country, Council, and I have been calling. The government has not, those who call themselves the government, sorry, they have not announced any economic relief. I have called for a couple of measures. One, immediate reduction at the pumps. Two, there is something called the David G. buses that were a big political statement in handing out buses. Those buses should be commandeered to transport the heroes of this time, the medical professionals that's going to work every day, should be taking them back and forth from work. So they're not going to join the public transport system. We need them. They are soldiers at this moment. Three, VAT should immediately be removed from all food items. I don't know why we are still charging VAT on certain items at the stores. And four, there should be, I would agree that certain services, supermarkets, banks, and so forth will have to remain open, but they have to announce closing hours at different times of the day so that they don't impose a burden on the public transportation system. So there are a number of things that we have reached out to the government for to say, please put this in place. Nobody, nowhere. And the last thing I'll tell you, Council, 5 before I invite your comment, rent, mortgage, loan. Everybody has to pay their loan or their mortgage or their rent with no income, and the government has been mum. All you're seeing the government active on is elections this and elections that. Over to you, Council.
Yog, the calls that you have made, the things that you have asked for, are very, very similar to what we have been asking for since 2015 per sector. For example, the mining, we asked to remove the taxes on the miners. We asked to remove the tax on petrol. In relation to the rice farmers, we made similar plea. Take off the VAT of agriculture equipment. Take off the VAT of gasoline and diesel. Take off, do not charge rent for state lands for rice farmers. At sector, sugar sector, we did the same thing. Sector by sector, we have asked for these things. VAT, we have asked, take it off school supplies, take it off medical supplies, take it off children food, take it off elderly, take it off. We have done that. And they have repeatedly rejected our calls for the past 5 years. So I am not surprised. And that is why, Leog, that is why they lost the 2016 local government elections. That is why they lost the 2018 local government elections. That is why they lost the 2020 local government elections. Because they have not delivered to the people of this country. And what your calls are going to continue to fall on deaf ears. Because that is not their priority. Their priority is the prags, the power, the luxury, the sirens, the drivers, the guards. That is their priority. And once you understand that, and more people, when the PPP says it, it is labeled as propaganda. But you are saying it, and people right across the country have been seeing it for themselves, and that is why their support has disintegrated from the support they had in 2015. Those are the reasons. I'm glad that you have highlighted it. And thank you very much, Yog and Doctor. Thank you.
One last question for you that just came in. I'm sorry, but this is something in our minds, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry to keep you, Doc. Council, the last question is that the elections were already delayed by a year, and let us say this delay also goes on for another year. What happens to the timeline for election to election, 5-year to 5-year timeline?
Look, anytime the Constitution fixes a time, or any law fixes a time, it is never mandatory. It is always directory only.
Right.
So one has to go to find out the intent of the framers of the law. If the framers of the law intended that a government must enjoy power for 5 years, then so be it. That 5 years will have to be satisfied. I've already addressed my mind to that. So that's a good question you asked me. So thank you very much, Yog, and thank you for the sentiments expressed about Riaz. I'm going over to his wake now. The funeral is tomorrow, and of course we all miss him, and it's unfortunate, quite a tragedy.
Thank you, Councillor. And on behalf of the independent thinkers in Guyana, we want to see the right thing happen, and we will continue to agitate for it.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.
To our viewers out there, we have in studio Dr. Richard Heads. We want to talk about COVID-19, coronavirus disease, and he has a specialist route. He has been lecturing to people about cardiovascular health, heart disease as we know it, and other sciences and so forth. He sits presently in a unique position, because I'm going to tell you what is not really a secret. His wife, my sister actually, his wife is one of those genetic engineers, I'll use a nice phrase, that has been engaged all her life in doing a research on cancer, breast cancer especially. Doc, welcome to this platform, the Globespan platform. I know it's way past your bedtime in London.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Yog. It's a pleasure to be on the program.
Thank you. And just before we get into our program that discusses COVID and also your concerns, viewers, about diabetes and about heart diseases and so forth, with regards to the COVID disease, I want to remind you, so far in Guyana, we have 19 cases. And as of today, this evening, we have 3 deaths. 19 cases, 3 deaths. We have only 1,100 test kits in country, and a small number, I'll give you the correct number when we resume, a small number of ventilators with a 700, almost 800,000 population. So it's a bleak, purview or review we have presently of our system. Our health system is certainly has never been robust, and it's certainly showing that now. We're going to take a short commercial break, and as soon as we resume, we get into our discussion with COVID-19.
Looking for an embroidery Attention fellow Guyanese, no need to go into person anymore to book your flight. Book your flight over the phone with a Travelspan GT agent. Once you finish booking over the phone, our agent will give you a payment center close to your home. That's right, no hassle for travel anymore. Travelspan is making it convenient and easier for you to book your flights. No need to travel to the office. Call Travelspan GT today for low fares. Call 227-1701. That's 227-1701. Or in Berbice, call Rose Hall at 337-4287. Travelspan making it easier. So call 227-1701. That's 227-1701. Or Rose Hall at 337-4287.
We are back live and welcome once again to Dr. Richard Heads from London. He is a senior professor on cardiovascular disease and sciences, at the School of Cardiovascular Diseases and Sciences in London. Dr. Heads, welcome to our program once again. And sir, I guess you are at home, are you?
Absolutely, yes. So the situation is here is that I am now in my 14th day of isolation at home. So as you understand, the situation in London is that we have basically, apart from essential workers, we've all been sent home. I'm a scientist and I've been sent home as well. So I'm working from home. It's not a complete lockdown, but it's very quiet. We are allowed to leave our homes for essential things, essential items, and those being to go to the supermarket to buy food or essential items, medicines, to exercise once a day outside, etc. But if we do leave the house, we have to keep 2 meters apart from anybody else outside. So as you can imagine, the streets of London are very quiet. Public transport is still running, although a much reduced service. And in theory, the only people traveling on public transport should be key workers, which includes health workers and people that work in key sectors, such as food distribution and so on. And all shops and restaurants have been closed, apart from shops that sell food or pharmacies and so on. So it's a very strange situation, something that no one in this country in their lifetime would have experienced unless they lived through the Second World War. And it's very strange. We're all trying to get used to it. A lot of people like myself have volunteered to work under the auspices of the health service, for instance, in testing for coronavirus and so on, if we have the appropriate lab experience and so on. So that may well happen as they ramp up testing in the coming weeks and months. We're just doing the best we can to work from home and keep busy and stay healthy.
Well, I must congratulate you, and I know. I mean, you and I have had some choice words, exchange of words on social media in private with regards to what's been happening at Brexit front, and I'm not getting you started. I know your opinion of that whole Brexit thing, and I know that. But kudos to the Brits that you guys have eventually taken to heed the calls to stay home and stay away from people and so forth. I must tell you, and I'm sure you're going to be quite surprised. Here we have some serious situation. You might have heard me telling Mr. Nandlall about some of them.
Yeah.
And today we have had even almost a pathetic incident where today a large number of pensioners, very old people, they normally go to uplift their pensions at the post office. And Doc, I'll tell you, it broke my heart to see pensioners lined up on the road outside of post office, some of them leaning on each other for support. And as we know, the older you are, the more at risk you are for COVID.
Absolutely.
In saying so, before I invite your comment on that, let me also give praise to those youngsters at Enmore. Hats off to them. I think it happened in a few other communities where they went, they put on their gloves and their masks and so forth, and they brought out chairs and benches from their homes, and they helped the senior citizens to be accommodated while waiting to go into the post office. But it just speaks to the lack of planning that we have here.
Yeah. I mean, it's not difficult to solve a situation like that, is it, really? It just takes a little bit of imagination and some thoughtfulness.
Well, we certainly have imagination, but it's more going towards electioneering rather than livelihood. But I'm not going to take you that road. I promise you that I wouldn't get you involved in politics, and I'm not. Doc, how is it in the rest of Europe? I mean, you're still part of the European Union. How is it in the rest of Europe?
Well, as you know, that the UK is somewhat behind the situation in Europe. So it's been particularly bad in Italy, as many of your viewers will know. And Spain is not far behind Italy. So today in the UK, we had 563 deaths in the last 24 hours, which is the biggest daily increase so far. So we are rapidly heading towards the peak, or at least, that's what we think, or what we hope. We are about 2 weeks or so behind Italy. So as you know, the situation in Italy is particularly bad. 111,000 total cases, and with 727 deaths just today, just in the last 24 hours. So they're really at the peak, and the situation in Italy has really devastated their health service. They've got, Italy is a country with one of the best health services in the world, certainly in Europe. It has a far higher intensive care bed capacity than the UK does. So things are starting to look pretty scary for us here.
Wow.
And likewise in Spain, another 667 deaths in the last 24 hours. There are lots of stories in the media of not just patients in intensive care in hospitals, but the virus sweeping through care homes where you have elderly people, in the social care sector, where there have been a lot of deaths as well. There are stories of due to the lack of personal protective equipment for health workers, that health workers are not turning up at the hospitals because they're too scared to go to work. It's quite a frightening situation, but we're hoping that the measures that we've taken in the UK to a large degree will mitigate against the kind of situation that we've seen or are seeing in those countries. And also what's really, really frightening as well is what's happening in the US, because the US is now top of the league table in the world for a number of cases and number of deaths, and they're not even anywhere near the peak yet, and they've acted far too slowly.
Yeah. So Doc, I want to get into what some of our viewers have been inboxing me about. We have all heard, in Guyana, I have been on radio every day. Nohar Singh has had a program, multiple programs on this platform too, as we do COVID watch to educate people, washing their hands, stay 6 feet away from each other. If you have to cough or sneeze, do it in your elbow or in a clean tissue and discard of it properly. And also we have been telling people that if you're going to be exposed to certain conditions, then ensure you take the additional precautions. we have been helping in any way we can in a number of things. Like today, I have had a gentleman reach out to me, viewers out there. We have had a gentleman reach out today offering us 100 bags of rice to help with the efforts of helping the poor people out. So we're getting a lot of, we're getting help coming in to help people. But of course, your point speaks loudly. That is, the people who are giving the help, especially the medical professional, they are at high risk. And here is what, Doc, and if you can speak to this some more, viewers, while COVID is taking place and we are doing all of this observation of social distancing, well, now it's called physical distancing, guess what? People continue to be ill for other reasons that they normally would have been ill for. Heart conditions continue, diabetes continued, natural deaths continue, natural births continue. So life on the other pre-COVID normalcy still continues while COVID is there. So the medical professionals have multiple challenges. One, they have to look after, they have to separate themselves so that some of them look after the COVID people, yet they don't know who might be coming in front of them in a Guyana situation that might have these challenges. So they have to protect themselves, they have to protect the patients in front of them, and they have to be mindful to protect the other patients that they will see as part of their rounds. So one could imagine what goes through a health professional's mind at this stage. Doc, tell us a little bit about your forte, cardiovascular disease and these kinds of challenges for the aging population, and what additional precautions we can take to be on the safe side of COVID.
Heart disease and other diseases, particularly respiratory disease, to an extent as well, diabetes, things like that. These are all comorbidities or underlying health problems that make the risk of contracting COVID much more serious. Okay, so people with those kind of conditions that are more at risk, they need to take additional precautions. So in other words, if somebody is at higher risk, they should attempt to self-isolate as much as possible. They should follow the same basic precautions, but if possible, they should stay at home, have family members look after them, go out for their food shopping and so on, and try to distance themselves and isolate themselves probably more than the general population. So that's the right. Best advice for those people, really.
So it really comes down to the whole aspect. I mean, as in a nutshell, really maintaining your physical distance from anyone. And we have advised people on this show, Doc, that, you know what, to the youngsters out there, to everybody, you have your grandparents and your elderly parents, don't visit them if you stay away. Staying away will ensure, unless they really, really need you, but staying away will prolong their life and their health too. Doc,
yeah, absolutely.
I want to ask, yeah, go on.
So unless you live in the same house, if you live in the same house, then as a family unit, then you have to isolate together. But if you don't live in the same house, don't visit. Well, visit, but don't go into the house. So you have to have a conversation from the gate or the balcony or whatever, because particularly if you're still working and you're out and about and you're not at home yourself, there's a risk of being asymptomatic and being a carrier, even if you don't have symptoms.
Right. Well, here is the other interesting thing that everybody in this world wants to know. I'm sure you might have I'm hoping you might have some good news for us, you being part of the medical fraternity across the world. Doc, everybody, even my little son Arya, 4 years old, I went from my office today to see him. He said that plenty people have COVID disease, coronavirus. I said, yes, there's a high risk. And he asked me the question that's on everybody's lips. Is there a cure?
Well, unfortunately, no. So, not at the moment. I mean, obviously, many countries are working, including the UK, are working very hard on vaccines at the moment. So it could be that a vaccine becomes available fairly soon. I mean, there are reports of work progressing very rapidly to produce a new vaccine. There's a team at Oxford that are pushing through a clinical trial at the moment very quickly, much quicker than it normally takes to develop a vaccine. Countries like China, in the US, they're developing vaccines as well. It's simply a case of how quickly can a vaccine be brought forward and be widely enough available for the general population, and then how long it takes to develop immunity. So a vaccine would be great. How quickly that's going to happen depends on a lot of factors. It could happen relatively quickly, but then how long it takes to manufacture a vaccine in sufficient numbers to immunize everybody. Obviously, if a vaccine is developed, the first people that are going to get a vaccine are going to be the health workers, the frontline health workers, and then following on from that, it would obviously be the vaccine would be sort of given out in a graded fashion according to need. Mm-hmm. But something that's also being developed, which is also crucial, particularly for the frontline health workers, is the antibody test, which will tell whether somebody has been infected and they've recovered and they now have immunity. So in other words, if they've developed natural immunity, it's safe for them to go back to work, because there are many doctors, nurses, health workers who've had to go into self-isolation because they've shown symptoms and or tested positive for the virus, but don't yet know whether it's safe for them to go back to work because they because the antibody test isn't available yet. But the news is that it's actually undergoing validation at the moment and may become available within kind of sort of days to weeks. But again, it's a question of how many countries have that type of technology, coming to the fore, and how quickly it will be available. Right. But it's absolutely crucial, because particularly the antibody test, because as we sort of reach the peak and go over the other side and we start to recover and develop natural immunity in the population, what's referred to as herd immunity, what we need to know in order to be able to plan for future pandemics, epidemics, is what percentage of the population was infected, what percentage recovered without requiring hospital care, what percentage required hospital care, and so on. Obviously, of most of the patients that are in hospital because their symptoms are severe enough for them to be admitted to ICU or whatever, obviously those patients are the ones that have been tested. But there's a lot of people out there who haven't been tested. So we, although we have these statistics and these numbers, we can only really guess at what the true numbers are. But when we have the antibody test, we should be able to have a better handle on what the real numbers are, even if it's after the event. But it's critical that we get those health workers back onto the front line, and as soon as it's safe for them to do so, because when we hit the peak, the capacity of our health service to deal with the outbreak is probably going to be swamped. So the other thing to bear in mind is that in Italy, for instance, 40 doctors have lost their lives, unfortunately, due to the virus. So it is so indiscriminate, and it's.
So the timeline for that antibody test, do you have any idea when?
Well, the government gives an update every day now, and we're hearing that it's at the validation stage. So as soon as it's validated that it's accurate and it works, and then obviously production has to be scaled up. So it could, for frontline health workers, it could be online, within the next week or two.
So here is an issue that we have here in Guyana. I don't know how you have handled it in UK and elsewhere. In Guyana, we have, I would say, a blackout on information. That is full-fledged information. So as you visited Guyana, you know what our geography is like. So we have, for example, 19 cases, of which 3 are dead. That's about 15% death, right?
Right.
Now that's high.
That's high. It's high because the numbers are so small at the moment.
Good.
Right.
Good.
So those three, you have to look at those 3 deaths and say, well, they probably had underlying health conditions. They were probably elderly and so on. So they were probably in the very high risk group. So
here is where we have a problem with the information. So yes, we know that it's more of the elderly people. That are, I think in the US that's 15% or more. But we don't know. We know that one of the 3 is a 30 odd year gentleman who has unfortunately been on the forefront in terms of medical practice too. So, but here is the issue I have with the government. We have 19 cases. Nobody knows what village, well, not necessarily village, but what geographic area other than a region. They say 17 is from region 4. Region 4 is a wide area. Nobody knows what specific areas these cases are from, that we could help people to be more vigilant in those areas. So what you find happening, rum shops are still opening, that is the bars. Bars are still opening. People still gather in places playing dominoes and cards and so forth, because for them, social distancing was not a concept that they could accommodate, and nobody is talking to them that the danger is real and it's near you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely critical. At this stage in Guyana, you've got 19 cases that you know of. Okay, right? It's going to be more than that, but you're right at the bottom of the curve. It hasn't happened yet. It hasn't taken off yet. It's absolutely critical that the country acts now with a really coordinated response to this, because otherwise it will just explode. And at the beginning of the epidemic, when you have those low numbers, it's absolutely critical to identify the patients both geographically and trace all their contacts. So everyone that's come into contact with that person should be isolated, because what will happen is in that geographical area, you'll have a hotspot. So you'll have hotspots which are dotted around the country before it becomes generalized, and it's critical that you identify where those hotspots are and you isolate them to stop it spreading. And so at the beginning of the process, contact tracing and isolating. So it's the containment phase, basically. So contact tracing and isolation of people, family groups, and so on, people that have come in contact with that person, absolutely critical, because if they're traveling around,
absolutely,
it's going to end up in other places. And then
I have said to people every day, I've been saying this on the COVID Watch program, that look, imagine if you have in Guyana alone, in New York, the numbers are horrifying. And I can only, you can't even empathize at this stage, but you feel it for what's going on. But in Guyana, imagine, viewers, if we have 19 cases, and imagine any 10 of those 19 traveled in a minibus and they were shedding at the time. And a minibus has 15 persons. You look at the numbers, and if every one of those 15 persons in the 10 buses then meets their own family members, that's 4 to 5 persons each. Look at the numbers. And you know what? Yeah. They might very well be near you. So, Doc, here is what I have a very good colleague, a very respected senior, not in age, but senior in experience, Mr. Wesley Gibbons, senior journalist in Trinidad. And he called me today to say that in Trinidad, they have issued the following message, which I want through you with your collaboration here, Doc, to tell the people of Guyana. Everybody needs to behave like as if everybody else has the disease and stay away from them. Over to you, Doc.
Yeah, that's. I think that's fairly good advice. So basically, that's social distancing. So if you're out in public, you make that assumption you're going to be relatively safe, that that compared to if you're mixing in restaurants, bars, that kind of thing. That type of social behavior for the time being has to be addressed, and that's the hardest thing for people, certainly here. The hardest thing for people to get used to was the idea that you couldn't go out to a restaurant or a bar to meet your friends or your family and so on. But although it's taken a week or two, but most people for the most part have accepted that now, and it's amazing to see people actually pretty much following the rules, obviously with a few exceptions, but
which every government wanted, but none could achieve. COVID has done, right? Have people be very subservient. Yeah. But Doc, here is the other issue.
Well, but the other issue Guyana needs to address is part of that coordinated response has got to be making the hard decisions about whether you close restaurants, and shops and so on. The only businesses that should stay open should be essential businesses in order to keep the infrastructure and the economy sort of ticking over.
You have hit something that I wanted to raise. And viewers out there, I have made a public call, and a lot of people have joined this call. We have done a couple of things. One is that we have called on the government to remove VAT on all basic items and stuff. We have called on government the government owns the power company. Do not have people go join the lines to pay the power bill. As a government, you need to remove that billing for at least 60 days to give people time. Not just times are hard and people don't have money, but why should people go line up to pay their bills? In Guyana, we still have a heavy cash system. And second one, I've called on the government to put a curfew, a nationwide curfew in place. Close the place down. All bars, all places of social gathering should be closed pronto, immediately. And 3, I've called on the telephone companies. You too need to remove data caps. Do what you can to help people to stay home. Remove data caps, give people a 60 days credit on their bills, and let's all make this happen. In the UK, in the US, things are happening. AT&T in the US, Verizon, they have all come together and they're doing things to help people. But Doc, in Guyana, we have called the government to implement a nationwide curfew, but it's not happened as yet. They're probably waiting for the 1,400 deaths as the number that was projected by PAHO WHO.
Yeah, but then, you run the risk of it being too late. But I completely agree with you on the economic front, it's absolutely critical that you support vulnerable people and vulnerable workers, people in the that are paid in cash. They don't have contracts. They're paid on a daily basis. If there's no work, they can't feed their families. People in those vulnerable sections of the economy, which actually surprisingly are critical for keeping the economy going, they have to be supported at a government level. And amazingly, that's what's happened in the UK. There's been an incredible response in the UK in terms of supporting people who are self-employed or who are on 0-hour contracts and so on. So the government has allowed rent holidays, mortgage holidays, and so on, and support, actual cash support for people who are vulnerable because they're not earning. So people in the gig economy here, the government has pledged to pay 80% of their salary for at least the next 3 months. So and then that would be reviewed going forward, obviously depending on whether they're allowed to go back to work or not. So I think measures like that are absolutely critical. Otherwise, you have a whole new problem on your hands.
That's right.
And also you've got to look at the long-term consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So if the economy crashes because because of these kind of problems that are knock-on effects of the virus, the virus may, the outbreak and the measures to combat the outbreak we don't know at the moment how long they're going to last. I'm hopeful, looking at what's happened in China, where it's more or less over there now, and so you're looking at minimum, you're looking at 3 months.
Right.
But if you take this, the thing you have to understand about China, it's really interesting looking at the statistics. Actually, the numbers. China is where it started and where it was. It was leading the world, obviously, in terms of severity and so on. China acted very, very fast and had a complete clampdown, complete lockdown. You're talking a country with population of billions. It had it had the potential to be really bad. Look at the numbers, right? China, total number of cases as of today, 81,000.
Right.
81,554. Now, for a country the size of China, that's absolutely incredible. The US is now already way above that. The US is already
US has overtaken.
So the point I'm trying to make is that in the UK the strategy has been rather than to have a complete lockdown very early, it's been to have a graded response with different phases. So containment followed by delay, followed by where what they're trying to do is flatten the curve,
right,
and push it out so it occurs so it's flatter, but it occurs later. So what they're trying to the idea is that if you push the disease into the summer months, then the virus is going to be less likely to spread than it is during the winter and so on. But the risk with that strategy is that it's going to last longer, right? So we don't know how long these measures are going to be in effect. Okay, and that's going to have potentially a dramatic effect on the economy. So the point is, the government has pumped billions into supporting the economy over this phase, and that's absolutely critical because if the economy is going to recover, you need to support all those vulnerable workers that
absolutely
they may be in the lowest tier of the economy. but they hold the whole thing up.
Of course.
Particularly people in the food distribution and people that stock supermarket shelves, those kind of workers. They're low paid workers. Often they're on 0 hours or short term contracts. They have no job security.
Of course.
They need to be supported.
Right. So, Doc, there is another dimension to this COVID disease. In Guyana here, I mean, on the programs I've been on, both on Globespan and on other platform, we have been educating people about, it's during the period of Navaratri in Guyana, quite a number of Hindu priests have gotten together, admirably so, to call upon Hindu brothers and sisters to not gather at the mandirs, but to do their worship at home. Hats off to those pandits who have, chosen to ensure that they broadcast their Navaratri satsang over the relevant fora like TV, radio, Facebook, and so forth and so on. Yeah. We have also had cause to talk to the Guyana Islamic Trust, who have educated and shared with us how you can give dua, how you can do your prayers while observing the social physical distancing. We have spoken to Christian brothers and sisters who have also advised us, and across the interreligious organization in Guyana have asked all temples, mosques, churches to refrain from holding any mass type of worship at this time. So the religious community is on board. There is another dimension, though, those people who have pets at home. I have on my own behalf and together with another colleague of mine, we have collaborated with the Arabs group. This is, I think, the two persons that we spoke to would have been Melissa Ramdeen and Devika Singh, I think is the name of the other person, where we sought their advice along with PAHO WHO about how should you deal with your pets during this time of COVID disease. And according to PAHO, I just want to share this with viewers out there. According to PAHO WHO, the issue with pets is that, humans have been determined to be the carriers from person to person. COVID has been transmitted. So far it is human to human. The possibility of an animal giving you something is, guess how it can happen? If somebody has the disease and you sneeze over the fur or the coat or whatever we call it of the animal, and you do not take the necessary precautions and you hug and play with that animal, then you are exposing yourself. So keeping a good hygiene, keeping your own distancing, refraining from the licking and the normal things you would do under normal circumstance, but ensure that you safeguard and you protect your pets as you are yourself too. Doc, your comment with regards to pets and our home safety on COVID-19.
So I completely agree with you. So you just have to be sensible. Obviously, there's no evidence whatsoever about pets transmitting the disease to humans. It's like with any other situation where you may be coming into contact with a surface that might be contaminated or whatever. You just take basic precautions. And as you say, if you have a dog, for instance, avoid the dog licking your face and so on. And if you live in a family environment where there's a pet, obviously the pet can go between people. So there may be a small risk of, being on the pet's fur or something like that. But the precautions are basically the same as anything else. And I think the key thing is that where people are responsible for the welfare of animals, that they maintain that welfare, that they look after them, and so on. So that's absolutely critical. Yeah. And if it's a case of, if it's a situation where you have to go out of the house to do that, so for instance, if you're a farmer or if you keep horses or something like that, and you have to go to the place where they're kept to look after them, obviously that's a reasonable excuse to have to leave the house. But if you do that, the same rules with respect to social distancing apply. Mm-hmm. So the social distancing applies to people, rather than two animals. So the same rules apply. And if you, for instance, if you have a dog and you have to exercise your dog by walking the dog, fine.
Correct.
If if you're allowed out of your house once a day to exercise, then I guess there's no reason why you shouldn't take your dog at the same time. So it's just common sense, really.
Yeah, and bottom line to viewers out there, bottom line is according to the WHO guidelines, there's a clear warning here. People who are sick with COVID-19 should limit any contact with pets when handling and caring for animals. Please follow basic hygiene measures. It can't be clearer than that.
Yeah.
Doc, any further comments and especially your appeal to our fellow brothers and sisters here at Guyana? I know you have Guyana close to your heart.
Oh, absolutely, yes. So I think I think that advice is perfectly good. That's obviously the way to do
right.
To deal with the situation. I think the issue with where you have people living together in the same house and you have family groups, that the advice here, which I think is good advice, obviously, is if you live on your own and you develop symptoms, you self-isolate. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you live in a family environment with several members of the household, okay, so the situation is that it is so self-isolation means that if you have symptoms, you don't leave the house. You have other people deliver your food to the house, and you have to stay in isolation for a minimum of 7 days if you have symptoms from the start of the symptoms, and then you shouldn't break that self-isolation until you've no longer had a fever, a temperature, for at least 48 hours. Mm-hmm. So then it's safe to unself-isolate. If you live in a house with somebody who develops symptoms, it's slightly more complicated. So the whole family has to self-isolate.
Right.
Well, so if you live in a house with someone with symptoms, the whole family, the whole household has to self-isolate. But that self-isolation for the people without the symptoms is actually longer. It's 14 days. And the reason for that is if someone develops symptoms and you're in contact with them, it could take you 14 days to develop symptoms. Mm-hmm. So 14 days from when they develop symptoms, if you don't develop symptoms, you're okay. If within that 14 days you develop symptoms, then you have to self-isolate for another 7 days from the start of the symptoms. Right. So it's a little bit more complicated if you live with other people in a house, but basically the whole household has to self-isolate. And the problem you have in Guyana is that if people can't leave their house to do food shopping or whatever, how do they address that issue? So, you have to have contacts on the outside where you can say, look, we've got one member or two members of the household develop symptoms, we're self-isolating, get on the phone and say, please can you go and do a food shop for us and just come and leave it on the doorstep.
Right.
And so that's so basically what you have to absolutely have communities coming together. Correct. To help each other. And ideally, communities tend naturally to do that anyway. But what you really should have at the national level is community hubs, which are organized from the government from a national level, where you have specific people in communities which are the contact point for those hubs. So whether it's a doctor, a GP, a health worker, or a local member of parliament or something like that, you need those people that are already active
Right.
within the community, need to form community hubs, which should be in contact with the central government about taking those measures out into the communities. So that having that coordinated response really would be quite critical.
Well, we will continue to monitor the situation here in Guyana. To our viewers, we'll continue to keep you informed, both on Globespan's online platform and on my own Facebook page. We have been posting relevant information as we get it. We share it. All the calls we're making to the government and the various authorities, we share it there. And to viewers out there, I would really like, I've been discussing with Mr. Noharsing, we still need to see it happen. I'm hoping that very soon we can put together a program like this with two or three of our doctors that can actually take your questions, your health concerns, and deal with them as they come in. It will not be a very long program, but it is something that we were thinking of and that we want to work on. To our viewers in Guyana, I would like to ask you all, as much as we can beat up on the government for not doing enough, the onus is still on you and I to maintain our physical distance away from each other, protect ourselves and our families, and ensure that we can keep the health of the people we love intact. Government can impose curfews, government can impose a lot of things, and hopefully they can come forward with some economic measures that can help. But at the end of the day, your health is in your hands, and your health can be maintained by maintaining social, physical distance away from each other. Put it all together, it's all your life is in your hands. If no other time in your life, now it is in your hands. Well, in your feet. Stay where you are and don't go out there. Doc, it's been a pleasure to have you on our Globespan program. Let me thank you very much. I know it's probably about 1 a.m. in the morning by you there.
2 a.m.
2 a.m. 2 a.m. I know, but you don't have to go to work tomorrow, so you'll sleep over.
Well, yeah. I still have to work, but yeah. No, Yog, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I, sincerely to you and all your viewers, I hope you stay safe, and I hope that that there is a good response to this, and that it's not too bad. And I sincerely hope the political situation resolves itself in a constructive way that helps this problem as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, viewers. Let's all say thanks to Dr. Richard Heads from the School of Cardiovascular Medicine and Sciences. Doc, I do hope that your students would have had such an engaging time in your classrooms as we have had with you. Thank you so much. Give our regards to your lovely family, and talk to you soon on this program. I certainly look forward to having you back. Thank you all, viewers.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, and good night to you all. Stay safe, stay away from people, and make sure you wash your hands with soap and water. It is something we omit in our program so far. I'm sorry, but soap, they say that the outer coating of the virus is fat. And you know what washes oil and fat is soap and water. So wash your hands with soap and water. Stay safe. And to all my brothers and sisters out there, say a prayer for your country and for this world. We'll all make it a wonderful world very soon. Let us stay safe. Namaste once again to you all. Good night. Assalamu alaikum. Goodbye.